Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Davey Blackburn. And joining me today
is your other host, Aubrey Sampson. So good to be here, Dave. We haven't been together in a while. This is fun.
We have not been together here in a while.
Good to see you.
It is really good to see you. It's really good to be with you. And we're so grateful for those of you guys who are tuning in, whether you're tuning in on a podcast platform, whether you're watching this on YouTube. We're just really grateful to be able to share this space and this time with you. We've got a great conversation lined up with you that Aubrey does, and she'll talk about that in just a second. But Aubrey, I would love to hear a little bit. Okay, we're on the coattails of launching your book, What We Find in the Dark, which if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see the book cover right in the background.
You can see the giant, subtle book cover behind me. Yep.
Right. And also on the coattails of the 8-episode release of the What We Find in the Dark podcast. And I wanted to hear just your general thoughts on things. I mean, how are things going? I mean, that's a lot, right? Just to, hey, give me your general thoughts on this. But just, how are things going? What kind of feedback have you gotten? I know we've received. I mean, this message is really resonating with people.
Yeah, I am so grateful. I've said this to you privately, David, but I want to say it publicly in front of our listeners. I'm so grateful for Nothing is Wasted for helping produce and process and put out this beautiful podcast, What We Find in the Dark, because it has been such a gift to see how listeners and viewers have responded. I have gotten so many messages of people just honestly in tears. And a lot of what I'm hearing is, I feel seen. I feel known. Thank you for naming this. Thank you for naming these dark nights of the soul and what I can do in it. Thank you for normalizing this. I had this was kind of a fun message. A woman from Virginia sent me a message, and she was like, "We're a group of deacons at our church. We're all women, and we love your podcast. We've listened to every episode, and now we have bought all of your books." And I mean, just things like that are really precious.
That is amazing. Wow.
Yeah. So it's been fun to have the book launch into the world too, as most of our listeners know. I mean, most of our listeners at Nothing is Wasted walked with me through the loss of Jen, and then even more recently, the loss of my dad. And so to be able to share this book finally with the world, it's such a gift. And again, some of the beautiful messages, I think people, I mean, you know this, Davey, when you finally find the words to express your own emotions around hard things that are difficult to find words for, when somebody else does that and you can grab that, it just makes you feel like, oh, this is normal. I get it now. And so I'm really thankful that the Holy Spirit gave me that book and allowed me to steward that message, because I know that it's ministering to people just as the podcast did. And anyway, so it's been a hard season, but a time of celebration for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it is so interesting when I love the fact that people have said, hey, I feel seen, and thank you for naming this. Thank you for actually normalizing this. There is something to, as you just said, when someone can put words to what you're experiencing and what you're feeling, that it brings a lot of clarity, even in the midst of all the confusion. Like it's not like it's not like you've resolved anything for them,
right? But
you've defined it, and you've helped them understand this is not a circumstance that is isolated to just you. It's not like, and I think that sometimes that's where we often go, is we get to this place where we go, this must just be me. Nobody else has experienced this. I'm all alone. And of course, that's just a ploy of the enemy.
That's right.
And that's why I love the fact that, I mean, this book, the podcast, all of it, the message that you've been carrying in the season of really shining light in the dark and saying, this is where God is in the midst of all of this. Even though there is a perceived absence, and even though it feels like he has pulled his presence from you, he is here. Yeah. And this is how to walk through this.
Yeah.
And I think it's just so, and it's really resonant. We've gotten so many messages from people on this, and it's been a fun project to work on. I know for you, I mean, you've been the one really diving into it. I haven't had to do anything with it, but it was definitely a fun project.
It has been a very fun project. You know, incredible guests, everyone from Chris Kane to Steve Carter to Cheryl Nemhard and more. My good friend Faith Uricho and Tara Beth Leach came on. So that was fun to get to have these meaningful conversations with friends. A shout out to Catherine Fitzgerald, the producer of the Nothing is Wasted podcast and the What We Find in the Dark podcast, because she just demolished it in the best way possible. You know, she's incredible. So, it was a great project to work on. I I think um, the evergreen nature of the topic as well, even though
Right.
it came out with the book itself, I think this is a message that will last, and it'll be fun to see more and more listeners come to it and hear what they have to say. But yeah, just a great project, and also fun, even to partner with Nothing Is Wasted in that way, and to kind of have a little mini
Yeah,
podcast
like a
network.
spinoff. I
Yeah,
know. I
spinoff.
know.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah, you know this. We've been dreaming up a lot of trying to figure out, is there a season where Nothing Is Wasted is able to do that? Does that look like? What does that
Yeah.
look like? How do you even dip your toes in the water with this? And so I'm a lot of times of the mindset, I guess, as entrepreneurial as I am, that I go, you know what? The only way to dip your toes in the water is to dip your toes in the water.
Just do it. Just
And
try
we're gonna
it.
just figure it out. And we have no
Yeah.
idea what this looks like. We can learn best practices from people, but we're gonna try it out and just see. And I'm so grateful that our community allows us to try those things out. I'm grateful for you, Aubrey, for taking the time to and really putting such a huge effort into bringing the right guests on, having the right conversations, bringing the right tone and intonation into all of that. And it's really speaking hope and life
Yeah.
into people as they're listening to this. So if you haven't listened to it, if you haven't watched on YouTube, make sure you go and watch this. You know what? You know what's really cool? It's kind of like, when you go on Netflix, it's like a limited series, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
That's what it is.
you get to the end of the limited series, you're like, that was so good, I want more, right?
Yeah.
And so people might be asking, is there going to be more? We don't know.
Right.
don't
We
know.
don't know yet. We're
But
dreaming.
we're dreaming, we're thinking, we're going, okay, God, what does this look like? Will there be
Yeah.
more in this? So I want you to go, if you haven't listened to it, if you haven't watched it, go back and listen to these conversations, and then you let us know. Write into us, tell us,
I love that. Let us
Say,
know.
hey,
Do you
yeah.
want a season 2?
do you want some more of this? What does this look like? And we'd love to hear your feedback and just really
Yeah.
what it's doing in your heart, what it's doing in your life, how it's stretching and
Yeah.
growing you spiritually. Because I know that would be really, really, I mean, that would mean the world to not just us as Nothing Is Wasted, but to Aubrey.
Absolutely.
To
Of
hear
course,
this.
that kind of thing is encouraging for the
Yeah.
soul. Yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead and listen. Thank you so much for those of you who have and those of you who've shared. And again, thanks to you, Davey, for backing it and supporting and
Yeah.
celebrating. It's been such a gift.
Yep. Well, we wanted to talk a little bit about this. I brought Aubrey on because there are times in life where we talk about this at Nothing Is Wasted, that we're here to help you in your tragedies, trauma, and major life transitions. And there are times that life transitions in a way that sometimes can be alarming, sometimes can be confusing. Sometimes you're like, I'm not really sure what this means. What are you doing, God? And then there are times in life where things transition because you're in a right season for a right time, and then God has a different season.
Yeah.
And so this is, we brought Aubrey on because we are coming to the end of a good long era.
A great era. It
An
has been a
incredible
long era. It's been
stretch.
an incredible era.
Yeah,
Yeah.
where Aubrey has acted as one of the hosts, first co-host and then hosts of the Nothing Is Wasted
Yep.
podcast. And it has been such an amazing time to have you a part of this, Aubrey. And Aubrey is now going to be transitioning off of that. There's a lot of things going on in life, a lot of changes, a lot of responsibilities that she's taking on, and a lot of things changing with Nothing Is Wasted Ministries. And so
Yeah.
there was a season where it was like, this is right to row together and to partner together. And in this next season, we're acknowledging that, the Lord has a transition for us. And so we're I wanted to say specifically, Aubrey, to you, just how grateful I have been. Me personally, I know our Nothing Is Wasted community has been so grateful for you. I know the way you have pastored all of us through these conversations, the way you pastor me in my heart when we have these conversations together. I think I told you this when you first came on as the co-host, that I had not experienced that kind of a professional chemistry where it was this
Yeah.
like, man, we can just back and forth, talk about what the Lord is doing, banter a little bit together.
Yeah.
It's been just such an amazing thing to walk with you in this and to row with you in this. And so I just want you to know that I'm so grateful for you. I know that our community is so grateful for you. And I am the biggest Aubrey Sampson fan.
Aw, thank you, Davey.
I am so grateful for the time that you have invested into this ministry. You've invested into our hearts. You've invested into our spiritual walks. You have been a spiritual director for so many here at the Nothing Is Wasted community through the podcast and through other stuff. So
Thanks for
Just
saying
want you to
that,
know that.
Davey. Yeah, that
Yeah.
means so much to me. And I know, transitions are bittersweet, even if you do
Yeah.
sense that the Lord is like, okay, it's a new season for nothing is wasted. It, but you and I both have talked about this. Like we both can honestly and authentically celebrate this era and how
Right.
much beautiful ministry God has done, and I just of course bless you and bless Christy and bless this team, and I'm so grateful to have been a small part of Nothing is Wasted. God has so much in store for
Oh
Nothing
man.
is Wasted, and like I just cannot wait to see what happens. And Davey, you're such a fantastic leader and such a anointed, not just voice, but I guess I'm going to use the same word you used. You're just an anointed pastor in this area,
Yeah.
and I'm so grateful for your gift of authenticity and your gift of hope and our friendship. You're right. Like we have a friendship behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and that being leaders and kind of being in this space, something that we share. And so I honor you and honor this team and honor the years that we've had together, and praise God for all of it. It's been
Yeah.
such a gift to be a part of Nothing is Wasted, and we're not done. Like we'll still
No.
work together. We're dreaming about things
Right.
together.
Right.
So this isn't
I
this
think
isn't
that's
like
what.
the end.
Yeah, I think that's what I want to like. We always. Here's what's interesting, Aubrey. God takes us through things a lot, and then we're trying to like help pastor people through those things because
Yeah.
I've gotten this sense for a number of years now that almost like the prophets in scripture, how they had to do some really weird, crazy things.
Lay on
And
the
God used them
ground for-
exactly.
yeah.
Look at Ezekiel, like 247, whatever. And like that, and God used those as object lessons. I think as pastors and ministry leaders that our life is going to reflect the same thing, that God takes us through some things. And then as he really helps us, as he shapes us in those, we can impart that stuff to you guys as well as you're listening and as you're looking.
Yeah.
And again, there's nothing like, well, it's not like we're on any kind of pedestal. That's not what I'm trying to say right now. What I'm trying to say is that as you're hearing us shine the light of God's grace and goodness in your life and help you to see that, we also want you to see that there are times where there are just ebbs and flows of seasons.
Yeah.
And you have to recognize those seasons. You have to go, God, I don't understand sometimes transitions that happen in my life. I don't understand what you're doing, but I trust you.
Yeah.
And I'm
that's
leaning
right.
into this. And even if it doesn't make sense, we're going to trust you in this. And we're going to, because you've got something new. And then sometimes those seasons come back and it's like a boomerang effect. And there are these ebbs and flows where you go, okay, well, it makes sense to be in it right here. And then it doesn't make sense in this next season.
Yeah.
And so we've always tried to keep an open hand. And I know, Aubrey, you have too, when it comes to your life, when it comes to your ministry, when it comes to your work, the moment we start to like close our hands around it and go, oh, this is mine indefinitely.
Right.
That's when things can, proverbially you can break some fingers. There's some
because you're grasping too hard.
Yeah, because you're holding on too hard, and it's like
Yeah.
you're it's in your clutches as opposed to holding it open and going, God, what do you have for us? What do you have for each person that's a part of this? And how do we honor that? And how do we honor what you're writing in this story? And so again, just like Aubrey said, we're dreaming up of other ways that we're in the future going to be able to row together, partner together, because we both love ministering to you guys in this space.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
so be prayerful about that as you guys are praying for Nothing is Wasted.
Please
As you're praying for Aubrey, as you're praying for everything that we're endeavoring to do.
Yeah.
That that God will just give us really a lot of clarity on that.
Yeah,
and so,
that's so good, Davey.
Yeah.
That's so good.
It's been awesome. It's been such an incredible season, Aubrey.
It has.
We should have done like a blooper reel or something.
Oh, we should. Oh, that would have been so. Why didn't we think about that? All the B-roll of us starting over and making jokes and sometimes crying and.
I think about. I did see something. Taylor, our old podcast producer, she came over to the house a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you knew this, but she was in town.
Yeah, I did know. Yeah.
And she comes over, and we're just like, it made me think about the times of like me and you and Taylor and trying to. And she's like, stop. Hold on. No. We got to start that over.
Start over.
I'm like, oh, okay.
We should have brought her on for this. That would have been fun to reflect on
Oh
that.
my goodness.
Oh man, we've come a long way. It's so
Yeah.
true.
Well, Aubrey, tell us a little bit about the conversation you're
I
having
was about
today.
to
This
say
is
this is
great.
kind of my final transition into a conversation, but this is actually a pretty special one since this is one of the last interviews that I got to do. It's with my dear friend Catherine McNiel and her co-author Jason Hague. He's a pastor out on the West Coast, and they have a new book out called Midfaith Crisis, which fits right in line with our Nothing is Wasted audience. It's really about, it's like a midlife crisis, but of faith, essentially. And what they'll talk about is how that's not something that's discounts our faith. It's actually part of the faith journey, part of our spiritual growth and spiritual discipline. And so, like so many of these conversations, if you're someone in trauma, tragedy, a major life transition, or a faith transition, you know, you're like, wow, this feels different than it used to. This conversation is going to encourage you. I know you're going to be moved by Jason and Catherine, and I won't spoil too much, but there's some funny stuff too, because Jason was a kid on I think on TBN as a little singer dancer.
Oh, seriously?
So he shares some funny stories, and Catherine shares some funny stories from growing up as a pastor's kid. So there's also just some good
funny.
pop culture Christian stuff
He's
in their
he's
conversation.
like the Christian version of a child star or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really
man.
fun. But I would love to invite you to listen to my conversation with Catherine McNiel and Jason Hague. Well, Catherine McNiel and Jason Hague, welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I am so grateful that you both are here. Catherine, you've been on before, and what our listeners may or may not know is we're friends and neighbors. So I feel like you're just over for coffee right now.
Oh,
this is very fun.
Absolutely. Can I come over for coffee?
Yes.
Okay.
When we're done, you definitely can.
Great.
And then Jason, you have not been in my home for coffee, but I feel like as you've co-written this book with Catherine, I probably know more about you than I should. So I'm really glad that you're here.
I'm glad to finally meet you. I hear your name all the time.
Good.
In glowing terms.
Good. You better. Yeah. No, you better. No, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you both are here at Nothing is Wasted. I can't wait to talk to our audience about your recent work. But before we dive into the book, Catherine, we'll start with you. For our listeners who may have not heard your first episode with us, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself, your situation, what you do in this world?
Okay. Well, like you mentioned, my name is Catherine McNiel, and I live near you in the western suburbs of Chicago with my husband and kids. I am a writer, an author, an editor, all kinds of word things. I'm also a hospital chaplain, and I'm finishing a Master's of Divinity at seminary, and all kinds of fun things going on. And in the summer, I also am a vegetable grower and seller off of my porch. So that's something fun.
That actually is very fun. And I have witnessed all of the vegetables on your front porch, and it is bountiful.
It is bountiful.
It's good for our neighborhood. Jason, I want to ask you the same question. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I live out in Oregon, small town near Eugene. I'm an associate pastor at a non-denominational church. I've been here for about 15 years. I'm a dad of 5 kids, and my wife and I've been married 26 years. So I've written a lot about one of my son. My middle son, who's 19, has non-speaking autism, and so that's usually the spaces that I've been in writing and in speaking, is in the sort of special needs parent world.
Well, we're
so
glad that you're here. Yeah, so glad you're here, Jason. Okay, Jason and Catherine, your latest book, which I have read, I love, I endorse. It is called Midfaith Crisis, Finding a Path Through Doubt, Disillusionment, and Dead Ends. What I appreciate about both of you is I know this book is theological in nature, but it's also born from personal lived experience. And so I would love to hear from each of you, and maybe Jason, we'll start with you. What led you to write this book? And I'm particularly interested in what led you to write it together. So let's start with the personal, and then maybe the shared experience. And then Catherine, I'll ask you the same question.
Yeah, Catherine and I have been friends mostly over text for about, about 6 years now, I feel like.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, right at the start of COVID, she did this thing on Twitter. We were fans of a lot of the same novels, and she did this thing on Twitter where she dared me to write a short story, an apocalyptic short story based on Zoom. And it was almost like taking Cormac McCarthy's The Road, except on Zoom. That's the way she framed it. And I'm like, well, I definitely can't do this right now. We don't have time to do this, but I'm definitely going to do it anyway. And so we started texting about it. And so we co-wrote this really weird short story. It got published. It was actually kind of cool.
I remember that.
Yeah, her husband was begging us to do to write a novel on it, but I'm glad we didn't. Anyway, the point is, we got to know each other by doing a little bit of collaboration years ago.
Yeah.
And as I had been going through a lot of personal family crises, me, like every one of Catherine's friends, is texting her about it and talking. And so she's doing her counselor kind of thing. And I was really feeling super shaken in just my whole self. And so she is responding to me. She's like, look, I don't want to make light of anything that you're saying. This is all big and difficult stuff. But some of this is sort of happens at this stage of life for many, many people. And so instantly I'm like, oh my goodness, I think there's a book there. Now, as it unfolded, we started really considering it's not just something that happens in midlife. So that scope opened up. And so we're using midfaith crisis sort of as a metaphor of midlife crisis, but it happens at lots of different stages. But this happened for me because I was in the middle of it. And as a pastor, that was a scary thing. So Catherine was a great person to be able to talk to. She's living 2,000 miles away and wasn't in that same place, but had wrestled with a lot of questions. So we decided, okay, let's write this thing. I feel really insecure because I am sort of in a place of crisis right now. So she was sort of a steadying force, I think, in some of that. And it just kind of unfolded from there. We said, should we write this book? Neither of us have time to do it. So let's go ahead and do it.
Sure, we'll just squeeze in writing a book together. I love it. And you did. You actually did.
We did.
Catherine, what about you?
Well, I amazingly co-sign Jason's version of the story almost exactly. I think the minute I definitely remember that time when we were talking, and the minute we kind of both said this would be a great book, mid-faith crisis. I think we both just knew that it would be a great idea for a book.
Yeah.
One thing that I'll add is I think part of the reason why we decided to write it together is it's too big of a topic for just the scope of one person's experience. And I think our life experiences dovetail and complement and contrast each other in some really important ways. As I write in the book, but also spoke on this podcast about a couple years ago in my previous episode, most of the crisis of faith that I experienced came about through some pretty incredible trauma that I underwent when I was not even a teenager yet. Yeah. So these are things that I've been wrestling with my whole life, and the faith that I have is kind of on the other side of that, or at least has been birthed through the wrestling of these things, which is, not to say that I've attained all this, because life continues to be difficult. But for Jason, he was starting to ask some of these questions, wrestle with some of these topics after decades of a solid faith. So we just came at it kind of yin and yang in a way. And so I'm really grateful that we wrote it together. But not even just those experiences. We were able to pull from so many other stories rather than attempting to say, this is what a mid-faith crisis looks like. We tell the story of two totally different crises of faith, but then also have different sets of friends and communities that we can draw from in order to have a better, I think, sample size of what people are going through who are genuinely trying to love Jesus and to follow God, but are just finding that the tools that they were initially given for that are inadequate to the realities of life.
That's something that I'm interested in, because and I know our listeners will be as well, because what happens so often is people hit their mid-faith crisis. I'm going to use your language, their faith crisis, and go, oh, then my faith must not be real, or the object of my faith must not be real. So I'm out, But what you two are actually inviting the kind of struggler, doubter, wrestler into is like, actually, this is part of the faith journey. The scaffolding may look different than it did, but like we're saying, lean in, like there's an invitation here. For our listeners who find themselves in that place, like they've hit a wall, and it's a wall of doubt, it's a wall of crisis, it's a wall of like, this is not, quote, working the way I thought it would.
Yeah.
Catherine, what's just a word of, I don't know, encouragement, advice, handhold in the middle of a season like that?
Well, I'm so glad you asked it that way, Aubrey. That's another reason I really wanted to write this, is that I do find myself really often on the receiving end of a text message or a phone call or a knock on my door, or somebody's buying tomatoes off my porch and then sits down and asks to talk, because it turns out almost all of us are kind of in a faith crisis or nearing one, or just on the other side of one. And, there's no what to expect when you're expecting book for faith crisis. And what I've learned in wrestling with this for so many decades is that all of the people who study faith from kind of a theoretical perspective rather than a theological perspective find that there's an initial exciting stage of faith that then you grow and you become solid, like you are confident, what you believe and why. But then inevitably there comes a moment where there's like a break or a crisis, and you're like, wait, what? Whether it's doubts or suffering or disillusionment, there's just something that isn't ready to go the distance for you. And it's actually what people have found across cultures is that it's in working through this difficulty, this pain, that we can actually come to a faith that is sustainable and beautiful, and less pressure, less tasks, less list of things I have to do, less reasons to hope that God loves me, and more ease and rest and beauty and peace. And so my encouragement for the listener and the reader who I know is facing this is to take a deep breath and remember that God loves you and you are not alone, and find voices of compassion and care who are able to shepherd you, because what you're experiencing is normal. It is awful. I'm not, downplaying that or minimizing it. It's terrible. But it doesn't need to take your faith. It might reshape your faith. It might reform your faith, but God is big enough to meet you on the other side.
Jason, for you, Catherine, thank you for that. It's a beautiful answer. For you, you mentioned you were writing this kind of while in the midst of your mid-faith crisis. And Catherine, you had already sort of begun to enter this journey even from childhood. This is a strange question to ask, but where are you now, Jason? Like in the midst of your, because now you've written a book on it, so surely you've graduated.
I've actually got all the answers now.
Great,
so
perfect.
Really
That's
good.
why we're having you here today.
Thank you. I am happy to say I'm not in that same, I'm on edge and it's all about to fall apart. Do I still deal with doubt? Do I still deal with disillusionment? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it doesn't scare me anymore. And to me, that was a huge part of this process, is that, it's so easy to sort of buy into the cultural narrative around all this stuff.
Yeah.
That says, if you are questioning, it is inevitable that you are going to deconvert.
Right.
And that really is sort of the narrative of like, oh my goodness, that person has doubts. It's like, you can confess all kinds of things today, but if you're a believer, especially if you're in ministry, then it's just like, boy, to confess doubt, that is a thing you cannot do.
Yeah.
Because you just sort of had this, at least I had this feeling, this sinking feeling of inevitability, like, oh no, is this the end?
Yeah.
And I think it's important if a person is in that place to be able to resist that cultural narrative. No, that's not your story.
Mhm.
That's not your story. Hold on just a second. The only thing you know right now is that you are having questions and you're in a different place than you've been before. This is not the end, friend.
Yeah, that's
It's okay. Like, it stinks. It's really, really hard. And I hope that really comes across in this book too. This is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
But there is an opportunity to grow here. And this is not, don't let anyone say this is the end for you. Because it's just not true.
That's such a good word. Thank you for that, Jason. I think I need to hear that sometimes. Oh, often too. We all do. Both of you as ministers in different ways. Jason, you're a pastor. Catherine, you're a chaplain. You minister in many forms and places, getting your degree, your seminary degree as well. You're right, Jason, that there's not necessarily a model of ministers of the gospel being able to publicly say, I'm not sure if I'm a Christian anymore, or I'm really struggling with, like, this whole thing might be a joke, and that sounds a little crude, but there's not a model for that. And we know why. I mean, some of it's American culture, some of it's the way we've been formed here in the West. But I'm just curious for you, both of you personally, as you've been ministering in the midst of faith, that feels like a cognitive dissonance, like you just said. How do you keep going? Yeah, I don't know who wants to take that question first.
How indeed. I think for me, one of the things I took solace in was, and we wrote about it. We wrote about Mother Teresa and how in her journey, I mean, she in her journal poured it out, and she did not hold back of the doubts and the anguish that she had, hoping and praying that this work, this incredibly difficult work she'd poured her life into, was going to be worth it. And that, is God even there? I mean, it was worth it because she loved and valued these people, but that sense of, is he up there for real? Because why is he so distant? And all of that pain that was there. And to see her continue on. And that's the story of so many of those who have gone before us. That's the story of so many of our, grandparents who have walked with God for a long, long time and walked through that hardship. And that's not to minimize what I have dealt with, but it just shows, there is plenty of precedent for people who have walked and kept on walking.
Yeah, that's good. Catherine, what about you?
Yeah, I love that. I would echo too. And like Jason said, we did write about this, like looking for kind of heroes of the faith that aren't the people who are being talked about on the news today, they're long dead and gone. But they were faithful in quieter ways than maybe we look at today. But I think closer to home and on a more kind of daily sustenance level, I think I live with a commitment to honesty. Which is a little ironic for me to say, as you both know, being so broken early on, I've struggled vastly with trust and vulnerability. But part of my healing process has been making the intentional decision to have friends with whom I am very transparent and honest. And I think that's something that we, especially people who are leaders, especially people who are ministers, have to have and have to cultivate, because it doesn't necessarily come organically. If you are someone that people are looking to receive from, we have to go out and find our people that we can say, unplug for a second, here's how I'm feeling, here's what's going on, here's what I'm asking. So I think a practice of intentional honesty and friendship and vulnerability.
You know what I appreciate about that too, Catherine? And I'm just thinking of this now as you're saying it. In a world where everything needs to go online, everything needs to be public, everything needs to be consumed, you don't necessarily have to have your mid-faith crisis publicly. Like, you can have trusted people, a trusted community, actual in real life.
Yeah.
They're the safe people to walk through, borrow their faith, be very honest with them. And you don't necessarily, like, I'm thinking as a leader, I don't necessarily need my entire church to know the days that I'm like, I hope this is real. But I can go to you, Catherine. I can go to you, Jason, and say, can you hold this with me and pray for me? I'm struggling. And there's something actually really beautiful in that, too. Not that we're being inauthentic publicly,
Right.
but not everything is up for public consumption
Right.
in something as vulnerable as a mid-faith crisis.
Yes. And I think sometimes cultivating it for Facebook Reels or whatever really cuts us off from even being present with our own selves and our own process. So I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Okay, one thing I want to go to is both of you, and I'm saying this with a smile because it's kind of heartbreaking, but it's also very funny. You both tell incredible stories of your childhood, and especially your like evangelical faith upbringing in your childhood.
Yes, we
do. And so, Jason, I have to start with you here. Could you give us a little snippet of kind of where you came from? And, you know, we don't need to spoil the whole book. People buy the book. Again, it's called Mid-Faith Crisis, Finding a Path Through Doubt, Disillusionment, and Dead Ends. We'll put links to the book in the show notes. But we got to hear some of your stories, both of you.
Yeah, I was kind of going to be the next big thing.
You were.
You still are, Jason.
Oh, thanks. Wait a minute. No, I was a part of, I grew up in Youth with a Mission, YWAM. I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with. And my parents had been involved since the early days. So I grew up in this environment where every summer I would go on an outreach, and it was like a performing arts outreach, you know, where we would sing to these songs. We do hand motions and all this kind of stuff. And so the first time I did that, I was 8 years old.
Wow.
And we were traveling up the East Coast, and, you know, we performed, you know, like at the Statue of Liberty and, you know, cool places like that, you know.
Yeah, you did.
And but the highlight was going to the Christian Broadcasting Network with the 700 Club.
CBN, yes.
Yes. So it was really, really big back then. And so we went on. I remember walking into the set of the 700 Club, and there was Pat Robertson right on set interviewing somebody, and we were going to come on right after. It was kind of like this little add-on show, kind of like a 60 Minutes thing right after the 700 Club called Straight Talk. And this man, so we go out there and we performed on the we sang "I'm Gonna Stand Up, Ooh Up." Catherine could sing it right now, I'm sure.
I sure
karaoke
could.
style. And afterwards we got interviewed, and there were like 30 people on the team, but I was one of the 4 chosen to get interviewed. I was 8. Yeah, so I was extremely special, as you can see.
Yes, obviously.
And so the man comes and he asks me, he's like, "Where did they find you?" And I sit back and I'm like, well, that's hard to say because they didn't really pick me. God called on me. He's the one who picked me. And everybody was like stopped, and they were like, "Whoa!" You know, and I knew. I'm like,
this is a spiritually mature 8-year-old. Yeah,
dude, I was so mature, Aubrey. You don't even know. I was I was brilliant, and
bless.
So yeah, for years in my circles. Now I joked that I was the next big thing, but in my circles, people would stop me like, "I saw you in seminary. You're going to change the world." Wow!
Ooh.
And I grew up hearing those things. It was, you know, is our generation. We would hear that a lot, you know, but it was also like, man, there's something special. And so I grew up feeling like there was something special. So I was very disappointed when I grew up.
Realized I'm just normal.
I'm just a normal person. What the heck, man?
You're special in your own way, Jason.
Oh, thank you.
I feel like a very important detail is what was your musical team wearing?
Oh, it's such an important detail.
Oh man, this was 1987, so we were wearing bright neon.
Yeah, of course.
It was had to be neon.
It was almost like a Hawaiian shirt.
Yes, I can see it.
It was bright yellow, and it had like blues and greens coming out here. I mean, you could not miss us. You can see us from space, they say.
Is amazing. Sidebar that's not important to this conversation, but in also probably around the same year, Jason, I was in a 7-Eleven commercial. and wore a very bright fluorescent shirt that said icy drink all over it. So I feel like, somewhere our universes were colliding at that very
Parallel.
moment.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Catherine, you got to share a little bit from your childhood.
Well, one thing that Jason and I chuckled around a lot as we were writing is that our childhoods were very much the opposite. I wasn't traveling anywhere. I was not on television. We didn't even have a television. No. I grew up in a really rural farming community, small towns, small churches. But we did still have a lot of really weird singing stories. So, yes.
We have so many parts in this book where we start talking about song lyrics. We had to cut a lot of it. But some of the songs we sang as kids were like, this was a big part of our writing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, we do have an entire chapter that is set up by a song that we sang frequently in the church that I grew up in called Apple Red Happiness.
Yes.
The next line is Popcorn Cheerfulness, and the third one is Cinnamon Singing Inside. So we've lost Aubrey. In retrospect, that was not the best setup for the realities of the Christian life, but it was really fun.
Yeah, very catchy. Okay, I know we're all laughing here, and actually that I was really hoping you'd bring up that song lyric, Catherine. And Jason, I'm so glad you knew the story I wanted to hear. But that's funny. It's hilarious. And also, can we talk about how those things set you up later in life for mid-faith crisis? Catherine, I'd love to start with you there.
Yeah, I think we're making fun of the song, but it really was saying, it went on to say, the benefits of giving your life to Jesus are that your life becomes super satisfying and that you every single day get apple red happiness and cinnamon singing inside. Yeah. And granted, these were just songs that children were supposed to use to pass the time while we were eating snacks and jumping on the furniture while the parents were hearing better theology. Right, I assume.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that from our earliest messaging about faith, it's that God is going to solve all your problems. Mm-hmm. And also that if you're a good Christian, you're not even going to have any problems. Right. So when the realities of life come up, I think we just don't have the resources to understand what's going on or to just sort of be present with ourselves and be honest. Yeah. Because did God fail, or is God like a scam? Mm-hmm. Did I fail? Was I not good enough? Was my faith not strong enough? Right. But the reality is that this is a huge flaw in the marketing, but Jesus was killed by the government, right. So he said that anyone who followed him would probably experience something similar. So the Bible is really clear that being a Christian has all the normal problems of life, all the relationship struggles and all the health struggles, all of those things, all the emotional struggles that all humans have. But then we're also going to have additional problems because of our faith commitments. So I think that's something that's really important to me, is just to really say, let's change the marketing a little bit, maybe, so that we're not so afraid when we encounter the realities of life that God has left us. God has promised to be present in the darkest day and the deepest suffering, and has proven himself to be. And so I don't know what song I would prefer to sing to my children, but it would be something that assured them that there is nowhere they could go or nothing they could experience and have to worry that God had left them.
Yeah. That's good.
If I could piggyback off of that, I thought that song was really important to especially to that chapter. But when you talk about the marketing, it's so true. Even if a mid-faith crisis is in some sense inevitable because of the stages of faith that we walk through, we don't have to push kids along into it if we don't want to. you know? And I
Yeah.
feel like by singing these kinds of songs, we're absolutely setting them up for a mid-faith crisis.
Totally.
Like, it's, if you are going to put this in a kid's heart that, man, I'm going to have peppermint energy now that Jesus is here. We actually had a lot of fun with this. Catherine nixed a whole bunch of my jokes because I had stuff like Toblerone tenacity and things like that. That she, you know, like that. But if we're gonna tell kids these things, they're gonna realize it's not true. They're gonna hit something really difficult. They're gonna lose somebody. They're going to feel doubt. They're gonna do all these things, and they're going, "What in the world? You sold me a bill of goods. This was a total bait and switch," and that just throws them headlong into a mid-faith crisis. It's the same thing if you're in a an environment that's, you know, can be very sort of word of faith, like, man, God will always heal or something. It's like, fine, you build their faith in that moment, and then the minute they lose someone, you are setting them up for a serious crisis of faith. So it might be inevitable that we're going to hit something, but we don't have to push at somebody into it and make it worse. Like, we really can help prepare them at least a little bit for the realities of what's to come.
This actually is a great segue to the next question I wanted to ask, because I do want this is a formation problem. This is a discipleship problem. So how can the church get better at this? I mean, you know, it's one thing to, like you said, Catherine, the kids are going to sing the sweet songs, right? But how can we as a church get better at discipling people, forming people through these difficult and dark seasons? Jason, why don't you start, and then Catherine, you can take that question as well.
I say tell the truth. You know, as we're raising our kids, you know, there's different levels of disclosure that we give them. We don't tell a 5-year-old about the horrors of Auschwitz,
right?
But we also at age appropriate times, you know, let them watch the news with us, you know, like, or we let them see, and you don't throw all that at once, but this is the same thing. We are training up a child to face what is real in this world. What are you going to encounter? And I think just telling the truth at those times is so very important.
Yeah, it's good, Jason. What about you, Catherine?
You know, I think this is part of why this book was so important to me, and why I wanted to write it and to do it well, is because there is a lot of pain. Like, we are all, you know, life is pain. You know, anyone who says different is selling something. And we can't be selling a religious system or selling a religious community that gives us a get out of pain free card. It's not going to work. It's going to be clearly shown as a scam. But the thing is that we believe that God is real, and that God is the suffering God, the crucified God, the God who has always sided with the poor and the oppressed and the vulnerable and the hurting and the brokenhearted, and has actually come in a body to be with us, to show us just how deeply that is true. And so I think one of the things we have to do is really kind of check our American dream theology that we are putting into both our church's theologies as well as our church's marketing. It's maybe not going to be as attractional to great big crowds, but Jesus said that it was a narrow road and a narrow gate. So I think the fact is that we are all facing devastating, mind-blowing suffering and fears and doubts. And if church can be a place where we are more safe to voice those and more equipped to make sense of them, not with pat answers, but with the presence of God and the presence of God's people, then I think that for me is the difference between deconversion and deconstruction. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, yes, suffering is real. And yes, the things you were taught about faith are likely false and dangerous. But there is something even more real, even more true, even more present, and that encompasses all of this. And we would love for you to hang in there with us and see if we can find it together.
It's beautiful, Catherine. The podcast is obviously called Nothing is Wasted. And I know you sort of the point of a mid-faith crisis is to let go of assuming you know what God is doing in the middle of a mid-faith crisis. I understand the irony in that. And yet, I would love for you two to kind of talk through, what do you think God is doing in some of those moments when we hit that wall of our faith? Jason, if you want to start.
Yeah, man, that is a question. There's different ways you can look at this theologically. I'm not one that would necessarily think that God is pushing us into it, or putting the circumstances there. I don't know the way God works, and I think He works in a variety of ways. So but I think in the moment, in letting us feel that pain and letting us feel those things, He is giving us an opportunity to draw near and to lean into the mystery. And I think that's where we grow. If we had the answers at our fingertips all the time, if we always knew the right way to go, if we always knew the right thing to say, the right way to think about something, I don't know how we would grow.
Yeah.
And this is such an important thing, I think, as we mature more and more, to think, okay, I don't have what I need right now, but I know that you're here. I know that you're close. And I think what God did with me is to stay right next to me. I remember, when I lost a dear friend who I talk about in this book, it was like my sister. I remember, going to the coast one day, as we do in Oregon. It's wonderful. And I'm sitting. We're
Stop
staying in this
showing
house.
off, Jason.
Sorry. I was sitting on this bench, overlooking the Pacific Ocean at night, and it was just so beautiful. This is usually my happy place, and I'm sitting here. But it was just 2 weeks later, and so I'm sitting here, and I didn't know how to think about God. I had no prayers to pray. I had nothing, and so I just said to God, "Can you just sit with me for a little while?" And that was the way I started praying. It was just, can you just be here? Like, I'm mad at you. I don't understand what's going on. I don't know why you didn't come through all these things, but maybe we could just be together. And I think that, to me, was what happened, is learning to cherish the presence of God, even if I couldn't feel the presence of God, which most of the time I couldn't, cherishing and believing that God was still going through these things with me.
It's beautiful, Jason. Thank you for that.
Aubrey, I think you framed the question something like, do we have any glimpse of what God is doing? A metaphor that I often use when I'm talking to people in real life about this kind of thing, and I think it made it into the book, is that of losing your baby teeth. When that starts to happen, when you're 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, it feels terrible, like, I need these teeth. How am I supposed to eat? Like, I can remember my kids couldn't take a bite of an apple for years. They couldn't chew their steak or a hamburger. They had to eat applesauce constantly. And it is actual traumatic on a small scale to have, your teeth falling out and then to not have any teeth. But what we know as adults is that this thing that was useful, but it wasn't ready to stand the test of time, is coming out in order to make room for something that is stronger, that is better equipped, that is going to last for years. And I think that is part of what a mid-faith crisis is. It's growing up, and granted, not in elementary school or the teenage years. It's normally like in your 30s or your 40s or your 50s. But realizing that what you had was real and it was important and it got you this far, but it's not equipped to get you the rest of the way. And so there is some upheaval. It feels like loss. It feels dangerous and traumatic, and you don't know what's going to happen. But I do believe, and like Jason said earlier, the great cloud of witnesses tells us this, and I've seen it in my own life, that later we look back and say, oh, like, that was awful, but it also made room for something stronger, longer lasting, more equipped to handle what was coming. And because of what I have now, Because of what I lost, there was room for what I have now. And because of what I have now, I have a stronger, more beautiful, more resilient, more peaceful, joyful, fruit of the spirit, compatible life with
Yeah.
God, maybe. Not less suffering necessarily, but more ability, I think, to be resilient, maybe.
So good, you guys. Thank you. I want to ask you one more question, but I want to get kind of a detailed question out of the way first. So this is so our people can connect with you. Catherine, where can people find and follow you on social media? Where can they buy the book? Jason, I'll ask you the same question, and then I'll ask you my final question.
Well, if you can spell my name right, you can find me almost anywhere on the internet. My website is catherinemcneil.com. All my social media is at Catherine McNiel. And my books are everywhere books are sold, including that one place that we don't like to talk about, and including Midfaith Crisis, which is either available for pre-order or brand new, depending on when you're hearing this. But yeah, you do have to spell my name right, so check the show notes.
Would you please spell your last name for our
I
listeners,
will.
Catherine?
My last name is McNiel.
I before E, people.
I before E.
Okay.
I could write a song about it if you wanted, but I actually have.
Okay, Jason, what about you?
My website is jasonhague.com. My last name is spelled Hague. That is so hard for some people.
That
as
is
well.
hard too. You both have kind of complicated last names. Yeah.
Which is why we work together well.
Yeah.
jasonhague.com. And you can find me. I'm probably more active on the Facebook side of Jason Hague Writer.
Okay. The last question I want to ask you both is just kind of, I'd love to give you a moment to just shepherd or pastor our listeners. So, for anyone who's hearing this and they're like, yep, I have hit the wall. I am in a mid-faith crisis and I cannot see a way forward. What's just a pastoral word for them? Catherine, we'll start with you if that's okay.
Okay. Man, I want to just invite you to, I think, to let go, to not clench, to not try to hold things together that you can't hold together. If some things need to fall apart, let them fall apart. If some things need to go, let them go. But as you do that, as you feel anger and grief and loss and despair and doubt, I think once we let go, those things can pass through us, and I want you to know you're not alone. You are in such good company. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to Jason. There are so many more of us who have experienced these feelings, and a situation maybe not exactly the same, but so similar. Face similar doubts, similar suffering, similar questions. You're not alone, and God is here. We are testifying that we have found God, even in the darkest places, and even after the longest waiting times. And let go and believe, if you can, that you're loved. And even if you can't believe that, my prayer for you is that you will find it again later.
That's good, Catherine. Thank you. Jason, what about you?
Yeah, I would say that what you have, your sincerity, your trust in God, what you have right now is enough for today. I tell a quick story. As I was going through my mid-faith crisis, I was meeting with my spiritual director, who I meet with every month, and I was absolutely falling apart. And I said, look, I was prepping a sermon this week, and as I'm prepping, I was thinking, I don't know if I fully believe this, what I'm preparing right now. And just trusting that when I actually got out to deliver the sermon, that would come back to me. And it did, but what do I do? How much, what percentage of faith has to be like strong in order for my faith to matter and to be real today? And so I asked him, I'm like, what do I do, Jeff? Like, how much has to be there? How much faith do I have to have? What percentage? And he said, well, a mustard seed isn't very much. And when he said that, I'm telling you, something changed in my world when he said that. Because, I've always thought about that verse in terms of like the power of faith.
Right.
But think about the minimal requirements that Jesus is giving there. Like a faith of a mustard seed is not very much, and that's okay. If that's all you have today, that's okay. And so I want to tell, listener, if you're not sure today, if you're less sure about your world and the reality of God and your place in God's, all of these things, the bit that you have today is precious and beautiful. Hold on to that today. You don't have to sort it all out at once. There's no rush. This isn't a quiz. This isn't a test. Just hold on to that thing and keep walking and keep wrestling. And there will come a day, I believe, if you keep going, that you will find purpose and meaning. Nothing is wasted, right?
Yeah.
And that will come. But today, if you're wrestling through it and struggling, that's okay. A mustard seed is enough.
So good, you guys. Thanks to both of you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. Follow me at Davey Blackburn. We'd love to interact with you, so be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends.
And there is something profoundly wonderful on the other side of it. And I have to tell myself, has there ever been a time in my lifetime, I'm only talking about this trial, but has there ever been a time where God has failed, where he hasn't been faithful? He's proven over and over. And it's just good to be reminded of that. I think worship is so important in making time to consciously be thankful and be specific about all the reasons that I'm thankful. Help me. It's like medicine that helps me through times of doubt and despair. So that's a little long-winded, but the shorter answer is we have a good Father and he understands and he loves us and he will not leave. He never has. He never will.